Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, just a second there. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Barbara Foster from ICC, the Compliance Center, and we are here for the update on regulatory developments during the past quarter. Thank you for all. Okay, my mic is muted. There we go. Okay, so good morning again, or good afternoon. This is Barbara Foster introducing the webinar this afternoon on updates for the current quarter on regulations regarding transportation of dangerous goods or hazardous materials, and also the hazard communication regulations. Thank you all very much for joining us. I hope you find that it's helpful. Now, some housekeeping issues as we move on. Some housekeeping issues. If you have questions during the class, if you look at your control panel on the top, there is a Q&A button. So if you hit that, you can type in a question. If it's something that could be dealt with relatively easily, we have our staff here who will provide answers. If it's something that's a little bit more in-depth into the regulations, it will be put on hold until the end of the session. So just wait till then, and we can answer as many questions as people have. I can't promise I can answer all of them off the top of my head, but we'll answer what we can. And then if we need to, we can possibly take some of the conversations offline. So again, if you do have questions, you can contact us using the Q&A tab, which will be in the control panel. Usually for most people, it will be at the top of your screen on the right. So, a little introduction about myself and the company. My name is Barbara Foster. I'm what they call a regulatory expert here, dealing with transportation of dangerous goods, or in the United States, hazardous materials, and other regulations dealing primarily with hazard communication. So looking at regulations such as 49 CFR, Canada's TDG regulations, ICAO and IATA for air, the IMDG Code for ocean, and WHMIS and the OSHA hazard communication standard in the United States for workplace safety labeling. So again, these are the areas that we'll be talking about today. If you do have questions on anything, again, just use your Q&A tab. I have just passed in August my 35th anniversary of working for ICC, the Compliance Center. And if you're not familiar with ICC, we are a company that deals with supplies and services for transporting dangerous goods or hazard communication. So if you're looking for any supplies that might be necessary, such as labels, placards, you need to create WHMIS or OSHA labels, you need safety data sheets, please consider us. We've got all sorts of things that can make your compliance journey a little bit easier. Again, how to ask a question. Look for the Q&A tab on your control panel. At the bottom, there'll be a box that says ask a question. So you can just type that in there and don't forget to hit send. Sometimes when I'm using Teams, I do all the typing and then just forget to hit the little triangle or airplane, I guess it is, at the bottom for send. So don't forget to hit that when you've completed your question, and it will be sorted, and the ones that can be answered right away, you'll get an answer back in the text. If they can't be answered right away, they'll be published, what's called, and put up for me to take a look at the end of the presentation. So just hang on to the end and we will get to your questions. One question that we often get asked is, will there be a recording? And yes, there should be a recording for this, which you'll be getting a link for it at the end of the presentation. So ICC has been around for getting on nearly to 40 years now. dealing with supplies and services for transport of dangerous goods or hazardous materials, as well as hazard communication. Our website is www.thecompliancecenter.com, and please feel free to check out what we have there. And remember, if it's not in stock or it's not on the website, give us a call. Our customer service people are very good at finding things that we may have to source from other areas for you. And in a pinch, we can always do custom printing as well. So there's just a list of some of the things that we do: transportation labels, WHMIS labels, packaging for hazardous materials, copies of the regulations, safety signs, and services such as training and consulting. And the ICC difference, we've got a lot of things going for us. In regulatory, one thing that I do want to stress is the regulatory helpline. If you're a customer of ours, we do provide telephone support. Either you can call us or go through our website, and we can help, as they demystify the regulations for you. So our agenda for the day is we're going to start looking at the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Pipelines and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration updates. What's coming up with 49 CFR and the Hazardous Materials Regulations. Then we'll go to Canada's TDG, where there is a big one this quarter. The addition now of a registration requirement in Canada. Brief overview of the International Dangerous Goods Regulations. I have mentioned these in previous quarters. Again, there tends to be changes at the start of the new year, so we'll look at those. And OSHA and WHMIS, some significant news on both fronts in the United States and Canada. And end up mentioning that the North American Emergency Response Guidebook, it's updated once every 4 years. The last one was 2020, so there will be a new one out this spring. If you use the ERG book, and I do recommend if you keep hazardous materials on site, it is always a good idea to have it available. It gives you a lot of good guidance in case of emergencies, and it helps to have the most up-to-date one. So there will be a new one out. They are normally very inexpensive, low cost. And they're created by the 3 North American governments. So, first topic, we have DOT and 49 CFR. Things have kind of slowed down a little bit, at least as far as what's being published in this quarter. Here's a list of what they're working on, and you'll notice that there is a whole bunch of in progress. One of the main ones I'm going to mention is HM215Q, which is the Harmonization Amendment Final Rule. It's been published as a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking already. Hopefully they will get it out reasonably soon to make sure that 49 CFR is updated to the more recent UN recommendations. And we'll talk about this in a moment later on. But it's a very important one to make sure that domestic shipments will match up with international standards. We have other things such as compatibility with the International Atomic Energy Agency regulations. So if you're into radioactive shipments, HM215A, again, is in progress with becoming a final rule. It's just to make sure that the radioactive regulations are in the United States are going to match the international standards. They're always doing things about adjusting registration fees. That is due to come out as a notice of proposed rulemaking at some point. They've always been reviewing special permits. Often these can be converted into actual regulations. So instead of companies having to always been updating and renewing their permits. They can just be put in the regulations and make them available for everyone. So there's a notice of proposed rulemaking on those. Couple that have come out this year. One about the real-time train consist information. The notice of proposed rulemaking was published at the end of June, and the comment period closed in October. And there was another one, an interesting one I talked about earlier on in one of the previous sessions. There was what they call an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, where they basically came out with a list of about 40 topics and asked for some general input from stakeholders, what they were interested in, what they felt needed work on, and that could drive the DOT in further rulemaking. So this was published in July, and the comment period has closed again in October. Other than that, everything on this list is under consideration. The first 5 are due to come out as final rules. The rest will be notice of proposed rulemakings, which will be sort of the first draft version for public comment before they go to a final rule. So the one that I'm most interested in really is HM 215Q, which has been published already as a notice of proposed rulemaking for comment. The comment period closed in October. Some of the important things in this, and it is quite an extensive rulemaking, but it will officially update rules in 49 CFR to the 2023 to 2024 ICAO technical instructions for air, the 41st edition of the IMDG Code, the one that was published in 2022, and the 22nd revised edition of the UN Model Regulations. One mention here is that they will be addressing the issue of the telephone number on the lithium battery handling mark. Now, if you are involved in transporting lithium batteries by various modes, you probably have realized that there is a discrepancy currently regarding the lithium battery handling mark. For air and for ocean, they have made the telephone number on the mark optional. This telephone number was originally required by the UN, but after a while they decided that it really wasn't a useful or relevant addition to the mark, so they are phasing it out by the end of 2027. Or sorry, by the end of 2026, start of 2027. And we would like to also, in the national regulations, do the same thing, but currently 49 CFR does not mention any of this phase out for the telephone number, that it appears to be mandatory. Now there is a way around that I'm going to talk about shortly, but it would just be nice if the regulations matched what's in ICAO, IATA, and the IMDG Code. They also, to match the UN, are going to provide exceptions from the requirement for suppliers to provide a test summary for lithium batteries if all that they are selling or shipping is equipment that contains low-powered button cells. Say the key fob for automatically opening your car door. Runs on a little button cell. And if the button cells, which are very small, low-powered, are installed in equipment during transport, then they should not require the supplier to have to provide a test summary. If they are not installed in the equipment, the test summary requirement would still apply. Also, some general updates to standards to match updated ISO standards on the international scene. Now, the workaround I mentioned for things like the lithium battery handling mark and whether it needs a telephone number or not is something called a notice of enforcement. it recognizes that the harmonization amendment is not coming as fast as they'd originally hoped, and it can cause some discrepancies between US and international regulations that can end up being just a cause of complications in transport. November last year, about a year ago, the Pipelines and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration issued what they call a notice of enforcement, saying that the federal government will temporarily exercise discretion on enforcement against offers or carriers if they have prepared the shipment using either the current edition of the ICAO technical instructions, Amendment 41-22 of the IMDG Code. So therefore, if you have the mark without the telephone number, that should be recognized by the inspectors. It is something that the DOT is intending to put into 49 CFR. It's just not there yet. So to make it easier to ship things internationally, they will allow you to use these international standards for things like your marking and labeling. So there is a link here for the notice of enforcement if you want to take a look at the details of it. And it is still in effect. It is. It says that it will be in effect until it is canceled or until the amendment comes out. Now, in Canada, things are actually kind of heating up towards the end of the year because we got a whole new significant amendment out of Transport Canada. On October 25th of this year, Transport Canada published an amendment to the Transportation and Dangerous Goods Regulations to introduce site registration with the intent of forming a client identification database, or CID. Now, those of you in the United States, you're probably familiar with this idea already, that if you have if your company is involved in shipping significant amounts of hazardous materials, or you carry enough to require placards, you would need to be registered with the DOT. And Canada, actually, back when I started 35 years ago, there was a similar requirement in the Canadian regulations as well, but it was eliminated fairly early on. But Transport Canada was audited by the government a while back, and one of the things they mentioned in the audit is that Transport Canada really didn't have a complete list of who is involved in transportation of dangerous goods activities, or any way to really estimate what types of dangerous goods are being shipped by these companies. So it's hard to regulate if you don't have basic data on who's doing what. So they put together an amendment regarding this client identification database. It was published in October on the 25th in the Canada Gazette 2. Again, there is a link if you want to check out the Canada Gazette 2 publication. And these links will be put in the chat. So if you want to use those to actually go to the documents, you can. Introduces a bit of a new look to TDG because it is going to add a new chapter, what Canadian regulators call a part. So we now will have Part 17 to the Dangerous Goods Regulations. And after 35 years, I'm going to have to start training myself to stop saying we have 16 parts to now saying we have 17 parts to the regulations. So what do these requirements involve? It says if you import, offer for transport, handle, or transport dangerous goods. Transport Canada actually started turning this into an acronym: H for handle, O for offer, T for transport, I for import. So if you do any of these HOTI activities, you may have to register for the client identification database. There is a registration portal, again with this link at Transport Canada's website. Remember, Canadian URLs are always a little bit longer for the government because they have to work in both French and English. Now, it says the initial registration by sites that do any of these 4 operations must be done within 1 year from publication. If you look at the actual Canada Gazette, there is a date of registration and a date of publication, which is a little bit later. It was published on the 25th, so that would be the end of the 1 year transition period would be October 25th, 2024. The registration should be renewed annually or whenever anything significant changes. Contact person changes, your site address changes, or the type of dangerous goods that you ship changes. Now, some of you may remember the initial proposal Transport Canada made regarding the CID, and I don't think they explained themselves very fully because it got a lot of really negative pushback, because the way they had explained what they were looking for, some people interpreted it as actually a real-time tracking system where anytime you shipped out dangerous goods, you would have to let the government know about it. And a lot of companies say that is wildly overexpensive and unnecessary. And Transport Canada kind of had to backtrack and say, no, that's really not what we were talking about at all. We're just trying to get this list of people who are involved and some basic details. So if you have to register, you would go to the portal, and there's a really limited amount of information you need to provide. First of all is your business identification number. Again, this would normally involve your CRA identification number for the business as a whole. The name and address of the organization's headquarters in Canada. Then contact information for a primary contact. That would normally be the person who takes care of the registration. And also a secondary contact. So, for example, if they try and reach out and turns out that the primary contact is away, then they can then reach out to the secondary contact. So 2 people need to be selected. One is a primary, one is a secondary, and their name and contact information must be part of the registration. The addresses of all sites where dangerous goods are handled, offered for transport, transported, or imported. So for the one company, you have to register each site. Now, notice that the registration is for sites, which are locations. It's not for individuals. So the idea is that you register the site. You identify the mode of transport used, which is normally road, rail, air, or vessel. For each class, or for each site, what classes or divisions of dangerous goods are transported. Notice here, it does not say anything about quantities, but for example, if you were an oil company, you might say, we ship flammable liquids. Or if you're a nuclear power station, you might mention you ship radioactives. You don't have to give a quantity, but you do have to say these are the sum of all the classes and divisions that we do any of these 4 jobs on. And also for the first registration, they would like to know the same activities, including mode of transport, classes or divisions in the previous fiscal year. So, so you would also have the previous year as well as kind of a baseline. Again, as you can see here, there is no requirement for quantities. There's no requirements for identifying when shipments are sent out, how much you have in stock at any point, or anything like that. It's just, you know, we're Acme Corporation and we ship maybe gases, flammable and non-flammable. We don't touch the toxic gases. We ship flammable liquids. We ship oxidizers. We ship corrosives. We ship class 9 miscellaneous, something like that. It really shouldn't be all that difficult, at least the way it is currently set up. And maybe you won't have to register at all. The amendment said that registration is not required for what they call pass-through goods. They enter Canada, they leave Canada, they may be kept in one freight container, such as a rail car or ocean sea container, and there's no real handling of them within Canada. So that there really isn't a site that you can register for something like that if it's just moving through Canada but not stopping. You're not required to register for cross-border movements conducted by organizations that do not have a site or headquarters in Canada. So again, if goods are coming from the United States and say they're going directly to a customer, the American shipper doesn't have a location in Canada, a site, then we don't have to do site registration. Exemptions for federal, provincial, or municipal officers, such as inspectors, who are doing their legal duties, who may sometimes ship or carry dangerous goods. They do not have to register. There's an exemption for oil wells. So if you're an oil company and you've got 10 different oil well sites, they do not have to be registered. And they have given an exemption to shipments which are exempted under special cases or special provisions. So this would include things like limited quantities, accepted quantities, dangerous goods on a vehicle for the purpose of making the vehicle operate, or safety equipment like airbags. The only exemption from the exemption is the section 1.16 for some reason. They specifically say that that is not exempted from registration. This is called the 500 kilogram exemption, and it allows shippers and carriers to take small shipments, again up to 500 kilograms, with reduced but not totally eliminated requirements. So apparently they felt that that was close enough to a normal dangerous goods shipment that they would still have to register. One thing that someone did point out when we were going over this is that the actual text of the regulations doesn't put this exemption in most of the special cases. And I actually sent a little note just to confirm this to Transport Canada, and they came back is yes, the way they interpreted it was if you're exempted under a special case or special provision other than TDG 1.16, you are exempted from registration if you ship no other dangerous goods which require registration as fully regulated. So it's a little bit unclear in the way they've expressed it, but I do have this answer from Transport Canada that confirms that even though it doesn't say, for example, in the limited quantity section, you are exempted from registration, it does apply that way. Again, want more information. Transport Canada has set up a fairly detailed page on their website for the client identification database. This includes user guides, an FAQ section, which hopefully will be built up as time goes on. People ask them more questions. And again, it's always much easier for the government, rather than having to copy paste the same answer and send it to 24 people. It's much easier just to have one in the FAQs. Contact information if you need to touch base with Transport Canada. One thing that I have gotten several questions about already is, do we need to pay for registration as is done in the United States? And currently there is absolutely nothing in any Transport Canada information that mentions a fee for registration, I would not bet my life that there might not be a fee sneak in eventually, but currently at least this is not being offset by any sort of user fee or charge for the privilege of registration, as is done in the United States. So that's the Client Identification Database Amendment. If you're involved in packaging, packaging standards are consistently being reviewed and updated over time. So they've started consultation on 4 new standards from the CSA. CSA, or Canadian Standards Association. We've got B339, which is for cylinders, spheres, and tubes used to transport dangerous goods. B340, which is selection and use of cylinders, spheres, and tubes for compressed gases. B341, UN pressure receptacles and multi-element gas containers. Again, this would introduce the concept of the UN certified cylinder. And B342, selection use of UN pressure receptacles and multi-element gas containers for the transport of dangerous goods, Class 2. So the bullets 1 and 3 here are the specifications for these, and then 2 and 4 would be how to select a specific packaging for what you want to ship. The CSA standards, I haven't checked them out, but they should be available. I know most of these standards referenced in TDG are now available for online for free. So if you go to Transport Canada's website, they should have links to them. And also, if you want to make comments on any of these standards, again, they have to deal with containers of compressed gas. Consultation began just about a week ago and will be closed near the end of January 2024. So if you want to check out any of the drafts or comments, there are the links that would be on the public review website for government specifications. A little bit outside the range of transportation of dangerous goods, but just a note, because this can impact TDG. Environment Canada, who is of course in charge of environmental regulations, they have a regulation, the cross-border movement of hazardous waste regulations. Again, this deals with specifically across the Canada-US border. And they have introduced as a Gazette 1, which is kind of like a notice of proposed rulemaking. It is for public comment. They put in a Gazette 1 publication of amendments to certain regulations, including this cross-border movement regulation. What they are looking at is updating the controls on the movement of electronic waste. Specifically those wastes without circuit boards or monitors attached. They give an example, something like a electric hair trimmers. So I'm sure there's a lot of those that are out there, and if you want a little bit more detail, there's a PDF for an info sheet on what they're trying to achieve with this amendment. Now, on the international scene, the start of a new year always means that there may be some changes internationally, but when it's between the odd numbered years and the even numbered years, there's normally not an awful lot that's going on. If you ship by air, remember that the 2024 IATA Dangerous Goods Regulations becomes mandatory on January 1st, 2024. And the operators, the airlines, do not normally give much flexibility over this. If it's January 1st, 2024, they will expect your shipment to have been prepared according to the 2024 edition. Fortunately, there's not an awful lot of exciting changes there, but there are a few which I'll address on the next slide. Now, from a legal standpoint, the IATA book is more of a guide to shipping dangerous goods by air. The official reference is the ICAO Technical Instructions for the Safe Transport of Dangerous Goods by Air, which is a volume which is good for 2 years, 2023 to 2024. And then there'll be a new one for 2025, 2026. So there not being any significant changes in ICAO happening, because we're just about sort of in the middle of the period, the biennium, what they call for ICAO. The changes in IATA will be more minor tweaks rather than anything major. If you ship by ocean, in 2023, you had a choice and that, sorry, there's a typo here. That should be 2020, 2022. So in 2023, you could use 2 versions of the book, the current one or the previous one, as kind of a transition period. So the old book was published in 2020, or the end of 2020. It actually covered 2021 to 2022, but you were allowed to extend the use of it through 2023 as you sort of switched over from older to newer rules. The newest edition of the book, it was published the tail end of 2022, and that leads to it's good for 2023 to 2024. But as of January 1st, 2024, we can no longer use the old 2020 book. We must be using the most current edition, which is the one that was published in 2022, which I know it sounds confusing, but that book is intended to cover 2023 to 2024, and then with an extension to 2025. Now, if you've worked with the IMDG code for a while, you're probably familiar with this, but just remember that as of January 1st, this new year, we must be using the most current, which is the 2022 edition of the IMDG code. We can no longer use the 2020 edition. Okay. So must switch to the 41st edition, which will be current for the end of 2024. Now at the end of 2024, again around November, there will be a new edition published, which will be for the next biennium. So it kind of goes over this. It's almost like a chain where in the odd numbered years you can use the old or the new version, and then you must have switched to the new version for the even numbered years. Going back to IATA, if you take a look at the IATA regulations for 2024, always one of the things I recommend people do at the start is take a look at the list of significant changes that they put at the start of the book. You can even, if you go to the IATA website, they actually do have where you can request them to send you just a PDF of that section that has the significant changes. None of these I would consider really earth-shattering. There is a new capacity limit for non-refillable cylinders containing flammable gas. These will be now capped at 1.25 liters each, and that's based on water capacity. They've given some clarifications regarding the UN certification marks and how they should appear on packages. Clarification on marking the total weight of dry ice on overpacks. Apparently there was some debate about this, and they do want each overpack to be marked with a total weight in kilograms of dry ice inside the overpack. They need that for calculating how much ventilation they'll need on the aircraft. There's a clarification of how to document combination packages. Combination packages would be something like, you can imagine, 4 bottles in a box. It's a combination of inner containers in and outer packaging. And I've seen it a lot in the past that when writing up the shipper's declaration, people were a little bit confused about how to deal with combination packages. Should they just say it's 1 box, or should they say something like it's 4 1-liter bottles in 1 box? And I guess they've had a lot of questions about this at IATA, so they haven't changed anything, but they've clarified it that they do not want a description of the inner packagings on the shipper's declaration. You would say something like 1 fiberboard box times 4 liters rather than 4 1-liter bottles in 1 fiberboard box, totaling 4 liters. So you don't have to mention what the inner containers are, just what you see when the package is completed, which would be, in this case, the fiberboard box. So it's just a clarification to help people determine how to write things up. Another guide to help you write things up, radioactives have some different rules on the shipper's declaration. They look a little bit different than other types of dangerous goods. So they decided to provide some more illustrations or examples of how to do the documentation for Class 7 radioactive materials. As always, there will be updates to state and operator variations. Countries and air carriers can add or drop restrictions or additional requirements as necessary. So again, there's always a good idea to check at the start of each year, are carriers that you use, are they planning on making any changes regarding dangerous goods? And countries that you may be shipping to or through, do they have anything new that you should be aware of? And then what I would recommend people take a look at is there will be some more significant changes in the odd-numbered year. That's coming up 2025. And one of the nice things IATA does is in the year before the even-numbered year, they will include an appendix that lists what the intended changes are. Now, they are not guaranteed to make these changes. I have seen cases where at the last minute, some of the plan changes were themselves changed, either dropped or altered before they were put into place. But it at least gives you an idea what you should be preparing for that will be coming in the next 2-year biennium for ICAO and IATA. Okay, so that's our transportation session. Then we have hazard communication for workplace safety. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in the United States, has a hazard communication standard dealing with labels and safety data sheets, and the same thing in Canada, the so-called WHMIS system, Workplace Hazardous Materials Identification System under Health Canada. And both of these systems were supposed to, at the same time, be updated to the 7th edition of the international standard for these things, the globally harmonized system. So Canada moved ahead, made their updates. They're already in place for the 7th revision. However, there apparently were some problems that were occurring in OSHA trying to get these provisions done. So the good news with OSHA is that they have finished their work on revision 7, sent it to the Office for Management and Budget for review, was sent in October, and usually that will involve a 3 to 4 month review at the OMB to make sure that everything that they're proposing is legal and feasible. And then we hope, if nothing else goes wrong, that the OSHA update to the 7th revised edition of the globally harmonized system as a final rule should appear in January or February of 2024. And then it would be basically harmonized with Canadian regulations, at least as far as things they've taken directly from the globally harmonized system. Now, again, that is not carved in stone, but it is a very hopeful sign that some of the problems that we've foreseen when Canada, right now we're in the Canadian regulations, we have one of these transition periods where you can use the old system or the new system. But there was a lot of concern that that transition period would run out and the US OSHA regulations would not yet be updated. So this is a good sign that there will eventually be a point where both Canada and the United States, you can legally pick one system that will be acceptable on both sides of the border. Canada, having already put revision 7 into our WHMIS standard, has been working on some updates. For example, Health Canada has a policy of providing some very nice guidebooks on how to comply with the regulations. They've got one for the consumer product regulations, which is very, very useful, and another one for suppliers trying to create labels and safety data sheets for the WHMIS regulations under the so-called Hazardous Product Act and Regulations. Again, since there was this earlier, there was this update to the revision 7 in the hazardous product regulations, the guidebook was becoming out of date, was not referring to the most current version of the regulations. So they fixed that and they have created this, updated edition, sorry about that, that will address the changes that have been made. Another thing they're working on is confidential business information. In the United States, under OSHA, this is normally not a major issue for companies because the OSHA rules, at least federally, make it quite simple to protect confidential business information. Health Canada, however, requires that you can't just say this is a trade secret. You have to make an application under something called the Hazardous Materials Information Review Act to a commission who will verify that, yes, you have the reason why you need a trade secret exemption and make sure that you are using it in the right way. It's a little bit clunky and takes a long time. So Health Canada has been looking for some comments on the process from people who have gone through it. Their goal is faster and more predictable response. Some things that they are looking at putting in are a consolidated and searchable web page, an online application form, new tools such as hazardous substances assessments. Now, there is no mandatory classification of chemicals in Canada. There isn't a list that says you got chemical X, here is how it must be classified. Each supplier is supposed to work it out for themselves based on the information that they have using the criteria in the regulations. But as a guide, Health Canada has been slowly but surely creating these hazardous substances assessments with they will put together what they think is an adequate assessment, which can be used as a shortcut or a verification of your own classification. The goal is faster turnaround times and a lot fewer frustrated stakeholders. So the latest of the new hazardous substance assessments are on their website. We have 4,4-methylene diphenyl diisocyanate, very common chemical used in some resins and things like that. Solvents such as diethylene glycol or D-limonene, which is used in a lot of cleaners. EDTA, tetrasodium salt, which is a buffering agent, I believe, and the chemicals morpholine and toluene have been assessed, and a not mandatory but sort of preferred classification has been worked out for these, and it's available on Health Canada's website. Last little bit I wanted to mention was the 2024 Emergency Response Guidebook. Again, the guidebook is updated once every 4 years. The last version was the 2020. And if you've used the guidebook, it will basically have guides for spills, fires, or first aid based on the shipping name or the UN number of any dangerous goods or hazardous materials that are involved in accidents. They are created by a joint effort of the Canadian, US, and Mexican governments. And they're very, very handy little documents to have. Certainly responders, the governments make every effort to make sure that responders can get them easily. And shippers and carriers, any receivers even, it's probably a very good idea to have these guides available. They will give you some written instructions for initial emergency response. The next version of the ERG guide should be available sometime in the spring. So it's been finalized, it's a matter of getting it out. It will be available hard copy. Suppliers such as ICC will have the hard copies. There are also electronic versions you can get if you prefer to, say, have one on your computer or smartphone. Again, not a lot of changes in this. Emergency response doesn't tend to change over time, but it has updated the list of dangerous goods / hazardous materials. New shipping names and UN numbers have been added over the past few years, and some have been removed as obsolete. So the table will be updated as much as possible. So if a UN number that might have just been added to the regulations should still be findable using this book. They've expanded some of the guides where they felt they needed to flesh out response a little bit better. At the start of the book, there are some charts on how to identify things visually. Again, this is aimed at emergency responders. And some of these charts involve things like recognizing labels or placards. There have been some changes over the years about these, so those charts have been updated. More information on dealing with electric vehicle fires. If you watch YouTube or social media or something, you'll probably see a number of videos of problems with electric vehicles, which normally contain lithium. Lithium is a very tricky material to extinguish, so they felt that they needed to be more guidance. These things are becoming more and more common on the road, and therefore, as the number of electric vehicles go up, the number of electric vehicle fires will increase. They wanted to make sure that we had the most current information on fighting those fires. Specific information for first aid for chemical warfare and biological agents. So again, just addressing some of these things that might be seen, say, in a terrorist attack. And one of the things I find interesting is they've added a QR code that could be used to contact appropriate authorities for reporting incidents such as spills or fires in transport. QR codes are interesting. A couple of years ago, a lot of people were saying that they were a technology that never really seemed to catch on. And I kind of think COVID has really done a lot in raising the profile of QR codes and how easy they are to just scan something with your cell phone. Most cases, you don't even need a special app to do it, and it will take you directly to a web page or a contact sheet where you can get the information that you need. So there will be a QR code that a carrier, for example, if they had a spill, they could just scan it, and it would help them get through to the appropriate authorities for reporting the spill. Anyway, so those are some of the major topics for this quarter. Please don't hesitate to take a look at our website, www.thecompliancecenter.com. On our website, as well as our products, we have something called our Help Center, which has a a sign-up sheet if you'd like to join our newsletter and get messages to your inbox whenever there's something interesting happening in North American hazmat or hazard communication regulations. Also, we have blogs. So often you can find a nice little write-up on certain topics. I just finished one giving guidance for the lithium battery marks and certain changes that are involved there. So if you're looking for an answer, it's very often our blogs will have addressed either summaries of new regulations like the CID or particular topics if we find are interesting. So please feel free to check those out. And question period. We'll come back to this, but just if you're looking to get in touch with us, you can just jot this down. We've got our 888 number in the United States is 888-442-9628. In Canada, our main hub is 1-888-977-4834. And you can email me at barbara.foster at, our URL is thecompliancecenter.com. I'll go back to questions and let's see whether we had any questions that actually came up. Okay, we had, first of all, does the CID requirement include limited quantity shipments? Apparently not. I was actually looking at the text of the amendment and it's kind of hard to see where it addresses that, but apparently the intent is that other than the 500 kilogram exemption, if you're shipping under any of the exemptions given in the section or part 1 of TDG, such as 1.17 limited quantities, you do not have to register for those. They're just not important enough to require registration if you don't ship anything that is fully regulated dangerous goods. Question says, in 1.13, there's an exemption for UN 1173. Now that would be for biological substance category B. So what about UN 2900 or 2814? Those would be for infectious substances in category A's, and to my knowledge, they would be fully regulated and they would require registration. So if you only ship category B's, again, it will help, once Transport Canada provides more clarity on that, but you're probably not going to be required to register for category B's. They are subject to very reduced information requirements, such as labeling and shipping papers. But category A's, yes, I'm going to assume that they are fully regulated, non-exempt, therefore you will have to register. Question above refers to site registration. Yes, I believe I understood that. By what date do you need to register with the CID? Okay, well, if we go back there, I can get this here. If we go back, the date of registration was within 1 year from publication, and the publication was October 21st, 2023. So you must be registered by October 21st, 2024. I would expect as that date comes near, Transport Canada will be doing a lot more outreach to try and make sure that stakeholders are aware of who needs to register and make sure that people are aware that this is a requirement that they have to do if they're shipping fully regulated dangerous goods. Okay, is it the standard practice for the lithium battery mark to be in English only for Canada? Or should French also be present for Quebec compliance, specifically regarding the phone number for additional information, which often has statements such as, for emergencies only, call Chemtrec? Okay, this is an interesting one, and it's the very last one, which is good because it gives me a little bit of time. First of all, Canadian federal regulations technically, they don't require any words on the lithium battery mark at all. All it requires is the UN number for the type of batteries in the package and a telephone number, which would be understood as the number to call for more information. So you don't have to say things like, for emergencies, call. You just have to give the telephone number. In general, when information is required to be given in text, such as a shipping document in Canada, federal regulations say you can use French or English. However, if you are shipping in Quebec, you also have to take into consideration the Quebec French language laws, which have an impact on any commercial documentation or labels. And I would recommend, if you are based in Quebec, that you try and do things bilingually at least, or even unilingually in French if you're shipping primarily within Quebec. But the issue will go away since the UN is eliminating the requirement for the telephone number in the first place. So by the end of 2026, the end of the next 2-year biennium, the telephone number can only go up to December 31st, 2026. After that, both the air regs and the IMDG code say no more telephone number. It's not even an option anymore. Right now, IATA, ICAO, and the IMDG code say the telephone number may be shown, but it doesn't have to. The Canadian regulations hopefully will be amended by that time to be able to eliminate the requirement for the number as well. In the US, you have that notice of enforcement that says, well, if you're shipping using ICAO or the IATA rules, then we will not enforce that you must have a telephone number on it, because that's just, we know that the goal of the DOT is to get rid of the telephone number as well. They're just a little bit slower. So my answer is, it's not a problem that will exist for an awful lot longer. And particularly if you only ship by air or by ocean, I would recommend phasing out the number sooner rather than later. For ground transport, if you primarily ship by ground, I would just put no text on there at all, then you don't get into the bilingualism issue. Anything that you do for creating documents or labels, if you're domiciled in Quebec, I would always consider the French language laws there. They're outside my area of expertise, but they certainly can have a significant impact on what you're allowed to do, even when the federal cross-Canada regulations say one or the other language is acceptable. They may say it's got to be French. Are there any other questions? Okay, here's one. It says, any changes coming to on TDGR 12.9? Also, training certificate requirements. Okay, so the changes to the TDGR 12.9, again, they are working on it with the harmonization amendment. I had hoped that it would be out more quickly. I was quite surprised that the CID amendment came out before the harmonization amendment, because I always feel that there's kind of a time crunch with the harmonization, because if you don't do it early, things get more complicated when you do international shipments. All I can say is they're working on it, and I can't say for sure when it's going to come out, but it has been put in Canada Gazette 1 as a draft. They've got their feedback, and we have to see what they do next. For the training, apparently with the training amendment that they had been working on, they got some very, very negative feedback on their Canada Gazette 1. And so it was bad enough that apparently they decided to kind of scrap the Canada Gazette 1 that they did, go back, revise it based on the feedback, and bring it out again as a Canada Gazette 1, a new proposal that hopefully will address some of the issues that came in the initial feedback. And then once that, if that gets a warmer reception, then they can move on to Canada Gazette 2, making it an official change. So I would not expect that that's going to be done within, say, the next, certainly, I would say probably the next year. So the amendment for training has been significantly set back. Again, when, I can't say. It sometimes, they'll be going, oh, it's right around the corner for a couple of years before they get it done. Other times they sort of make you think, oh, we're just early days, and then boom, there's a final amendment right out. But I would not expect the training would probably be finalized till sometime, at least the earliest I foresee is the middle of 2024, maybe later. Okay, so any major changes to shipping lithium-ion batteries? Not for 2024. I have been told that the UN committee has looked at some significant changes for 2025 and 2026. So that's something that you will have to keep your ear to the ground. That they are looking, there's still fires, and particularly the air carriers being concerned about it. So for the next year, again, we're still in the middle of the current biennium. There's not going to be a lot of changes, but I would expect to see a number of changes, such as right now, if you're shipping standalone rechargeable lithium batteries, they're not supposed to be charged more than 30%. That does not apply to the batteries when they're in or packed with equipment, and they may extend that to cover batteries with equipment as well. So there are significant changes there. Mike has a question about whether you must register if you send category B as well as A. Okay, well, again, if it says that Part 17 does apply, then yes, then that's there. But in general, if it's very unclear, but in most exemptions, whether they're meant to address Part 17 or not. If 1.39 says specifically that Part 17 does apply, then yes, you will have to register. So thank you for pointing that out, Mike. I didn't have it in front of me and forgot about that little section there. So category Bs will have to be registered. Are there any other questions? If not, I would like to thank everyone for attending. We will be having another one of these in the first quarter next year, so we can see how things are progressing. Thank you very much for coming, and if there's anything that ICC can do to help you in your regulatory compliance job, then please don't hesitate to contact us and discuss it with us. Otherwise, I'd like everybody to have a good afternoon, and hopefully all your shipments will go well. So have a good one, and we will see you in 3 months or so.